Hello everyone, and welcome. Tonight, let us journey together, not just into the well-trodden paths of medieval history, of kings and castles, knights and crusades, but into a much deeper, more intimate landscape, the very soul of the medieval person. We're going to explore a world shaped less by rigid logic or official doctrine, and more by the whispers in the wind, the shadows in the forest, and the unspoken fears and hopes that colored every waking moment. Imagine if you can living in an age when every creak of the floorboards, every strange dream, every sudden illness wasn't just a random occurrence but a potent sign, a blessing or a curse from unseen forces that were as real and present as the stones of their village church. This was the pervasive, vibrant, and often terrifying realm of medieval superstition and folklore. The breath of mystery, nature as a living force in the Middle Ages. The natural world was far from a mere backdrop or a collection of resources. It was a vast, pulsating, sentient entity, a tapestry woven with threads of mystery and imbued with hidden, often dangerous powers. Lacking the scientific understanding we possess today, medieval people attributed every unexplained phenomenon to something beyond human comprehension. The wind wasn't just moving air. It could be the breath of spirits, carrying warnings or malicious gossip. A sudden, violent storm wasn't just weather. It might be divine wrath descending, or the furious work of malevolent forces, perhaps a coven of witches stirring the air. The forest wasn't merely a collection of trees. It was a dark, brooding realm, a domain of mischievous fairies who led travelers astray, or fearsome goblins lurking in shadowed glades, ready to play cruel tricks. Think of a peasant whose entire existence hinged on the unpredictable cycles of nature. A sudden blight on his precious crops, a healthy cow inexplicably falling ill overnight, or a child's inexplicable burning fever could not be explained by modern concepts of bacteria or disease. Instead, such misfortunes were almost always interpreted as a sign, perhaps a punishment for an unconfessed sin, a bitter curse from an envious neighbor, or the malicious interference of a supernatural being. This deeply animistic worldview meant that people lived in constant vigilance, forever seeking ways to appease these powerful forces, protect themselves from their malevolence, or desperately interpret the myriad signs they believed surrounded them. Every sunrise, every moon cycle, every budding plant, and every wilting leaf held a deeper, often mystical significance. Shields against the unseen, charms and amulets to navigate a world so rife with perceived dangers. Medieval people turned to a fascinating and diverse array of protections. They held an unwavering belief in the power of charms and amulets, objects carefully selected or crafted, then imbued with magical or protective properties through prayer, blessing, or simple folk tradition. Perhaps the most potent of these were holy relics. Tiny fragments of saints' bones, splinters believed to be from the true cross, or even dust gathered from a holy shrine, were considered incredibly powerful. Wealthier individuals might commission intricate pendants to hold these minute treasures, wearing them close to their skin, while commoners would undertake arduous pilgrimages to touch a local saint's shrine, believing divine power emanated directly from it, capable of warding off evil, curing illness, or averting misfortune. Imagine the quiet reverence, the palpable hope, as someone knelt before a reliquary, truly believing that touching it could connect them directly to heavenly protection. Then there was iron. This common, strong metal was universally believed to possess protective qualities against evil spirits, fairies, and even lightning. It was a common sight to find a horseshoe nailed above a farmhouse doorway, its open end pointing upwards to catch good luck, or iron nails, driven into a barn door to prevent malevolent forces from entering and harming livestock. Its inherent strength and resistance to rust, especially compared to other metals available at the time, likely contributed to this widespread belief in its incorruptibility against evil. Salt, a precious commodity often referred to as white gold, was not only vital for preserving food, but also considered an extraordinarily powerful ward against evil. It was sprinkled liberally in homes, thrown over the shoulder to avert bad luck when an ill omen was perceived, and used in various protective rituals, from purifying new dwellings to protecting butter churns from malevolent influences. Its purity and preserving qualities made it an emblem of protection against decay and corruption, both physical and spiritual. Beyond their practical medicinal uses, certain herbs and plants were believed to possess significant magical protective properties. Plants like vervain, St. John's wort, or the rowan tree were thought to offer defenses against witches, lightning strikes, or evil spirits. They might be carefully hung in doorways, carried discreetly in small pouches, or woven into protective garlands worn during festivals. Each plant had its own specific lore. St. John's wort, for example, was collected on St. John's Eve and believed to ward off evil for the coming year. Finally, any blessed object, be it holy water, consecrated by a priest, a piece of consecrated bread, or even a simple wooden crucifix, was thought to offer profound protection. Picture a traveler about to embark on a long and perilous journey through dense forests or across treacherous rivers. Making the sign of the cross and sprinkling holy water on their path, truly believing it offered an invisible shield against the dangers lurking ahead. These objects and rituals weren't mere superstitions in their eyes. They were practical, essential tools, their primary defense against the unseen, yet very real, threats of their precarious world. The whispers of malice, witches and accusations, perhaps one of the most chilling and pervasive fears in the medieval mind was that of witches. While the mass witch hunts that consumed Europe in the early modern period were still centuries away, the deep-seated belief in witches and malevolent magic, often referred to as maleficium, was profoundly ingrained. A witch was typically imagined as someone, often an older woman, perhaps a solitary village healer who had fallen out of favor, or simply an outcast who didn't conform, who had made a pact with the devil, or was able to harness dark demonic powers to cause harm. Imagine a tragic sequence of misfortunes befalling a family. Their most prized cow suddenly dies. A healthy child inexplicably falls gravely ill. Their carefully tended crops mysteriously fail year after year. Without any understanding of germ theory, animal husbandry, or agricultural science, suspicion could quickly and terrifyingly turn towards an outsider, a reclusive neighbor, or someone with whom a bitter quarrel had recently occurred. Accusations fueled by fear, ignorance, and rampant rumor could utterly ruin a life, leading to ostracization, violent attacks from a terrified populace, or even a terrifying, often biased, trial, frequently with little evidence beyond circumstantial misfortune or the testimony of accusers. People would desperately resort to countercharms, like hanging horseshoes with the belief they repelled evil, or putting pinches of salt into their butter churns to protect their dairy from a witch as supposed curses. The sheer dread of being bewitched, or worse, of being falsely accused of witchcraft, cast a very real, chilling shadow over the daily lives of many medieval people. Creatures of shadow and light, fairies, goblins, and household spirits. Beyond the tangible fear of witches and their dark magic, medieval folklore was also incredibly rich with beliefs in a host of other supernatural beings, many of whom blurred the lines between ancient pagan beliefs and newly integrated Christian demonology. The fairies, or the fairy folk, were perhaps the most ambiguous. They could be breathtakingly beautiful and benevolent, offering gifts or guidance, but just as often, they were mischievous, capricious, or even downright dangerous. They were believed to inhabit forests, ancient hills, hidden springs, or dwell beneath mysterious mounds. Tales abounded of them stealing unattended human babies and leaving a changeling, a sickly, unresponsive fairy child in their place. They might lure travelers astray with enchanting music or shimmering lights, or, conversely, reward kindness and generosity with unexpected gold or good fortune. Villagers might leave small offerings of milk, bread, or even shiny objects outside their doors at night to appease them. Imagine carefully pouring a bit of fresh cream into a hollow stone before bed, just in case, hoping to avoid their wrath and perhaps even curry their favor. More overtly malevolent or simply troublesome were goblins and boggarts. These creatures were often associated with dark, hidden places, caves, forgotten ruins, or abandoned buildings. They were blamed for spoiling milk, causing tools to break at crucial moments, or deliberately leading travelers into dangerous bogs or quicksand. Then there were the house spirits, often benign, such as the brownies or hobgoblins. In many regions, these were believed to be helpful, though often shy. Household spirits who might perform chores at night, sweeping the hearth, tidying up, or churning butter in exchange for a simple bowl of cream, a quiet corner, or a small piece of bread. Disturbing them or failing to offer their tribute, however, could lead to misfortune, things going missing, or objects inexplicably breaking. This belief offered a comforting, if superstitious, explanation for small acts of good fortune or unseen help around the home, embodying a sense of a living, breathing house with its own resident spirit. These were not abstract concepts. They were believed to be very real, tangible inhabitants of the medieval landscape, profoundly shaping how people approached nature, protected their homes, and understood the countless quirks of everyday life. The power of words, incantations, charms, and blessings. In a world where so much was beyond their control, medieval people deeply believed in the inherent power of spoken words to heal, to harm, to protect, and to compel. This gave rise to a rich tradition of incantations, charms, and blessings, often blurring the lines between prayer and magic. A spoken charm might be recited over a sick animal to cure its ailment, or whispered over a struggling crop to ensure a bountiful harvest. These weren't necessarily formal prayers, but often rhyming verses, ancient invocations, or simple, earnest pleas believed to harness natural or spiritual energies. For instance, a toothache might be charmed away by reciting a specific verse believed to bind the pain. Blessings were equally vital. Beyond the official blessings of the church, people had their own folk blessings for nearly every occasion. Blessing a new plow before the spring planting, blessing children before a journey, or blessing food before a meal. These were acts of invoking good fortune and protection through the power of speech. Conversely, there was a profound fear of curses. A spoken curse, delivered by an angry neighbor or a wronged individual, was genuinely believed to cause misfortune, illness, or even death. This fear underpinned many social interactions, encouraging people to be cautious of offending others, especially those perceived to have hidden powers or a strong connection to the supernatural. The belief in curses led to counter-curses, or spells designed to unwind malevolent magic. The power of the word, whether for good or ill, was a fundamental component of the medieval belief system. Omens and portents, reading the world's signals in a world without scientific understanding every unusual natural event, every strange animal behavior, every dream could be interpreted as an omen or a portent, a direct sign from God, from the heavens or from unseen forces carrying immense and often terrifying meaning about the future. A bright comet blazing across the night sky was almost universally seen as a harbinger of doom, a sign of impending war, a devastating plague, the death of a king, or a major societal upheaval. Imagine the widespread fear, the frantic prayers, and the anxious discussions generated across villages and towns by such a rare and spectacular celestial event. Animal behavior was constantly scrutinized. The unusual cries of specific birds, the sudden, unexplained death of livestock in a healthy herd, a dog howling mournfully at the moon, or a cat inexplicably abandoning a house, might all be interpreted as dire warnings of impending disaster, the presence of evil, or even a coming death. Specific animals also carried their own lore. Ravens were often associated with death, while swallows nesting in eaves were considered a sign of good luck. Dreams were not dismissed as random brain activity. They were often believed to be potent messages from God, from benevolent or malevolent demons, or from the departed spirits of ancestors, holding profound prophetic meaning or revealing hidden truths. People would diligently recall their dreams and consult local dream interpreters for guidance on their hidden significance. Even personal bodily sensations could be omens. An itchy palm might mean money coming or going. A ringing in the ears could signify someone speaking about you, and a sudden sneeze might indicate that spirits were near. People lived in a constant state of heightened observation, seeking to read these myriad signs and prepare for what they might foretell, hoping to avert disaster or seize opportunity. Healing and superstition. Beyond humors, while the learned physicians of the era adhered to the sophisticated, if flawed, theory of humors, believing illness was caused by an imbalance of the four bodily fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Everyday healing for the common person often blended practical herbal remedies with strong doses of superstition and folk magic. Medical texts themselves sometimes included astrological calculations or magical formulae. For a persistent fever, beyond a cool poultice or a specific herbal infusion, a charm might be recited over the patient, a specific saint invoked, or even a piece of blessed bread placed under their pillow. For a lingering or inexplicable illness, a person might undertake a difficult pilgrimage to a distant shrine, truly believing in the miraculous healing power of a holy relic found there. Sympathetic magic was a common practice, the belief that like affects like. For example, a fevered limb might be bound with a red cloth, mirroring the redness of the fever in the hope of drawing the heat out. Or a sick person's nail clippings or a lock of their hair might be buried in the earth, with the belief that the illness could be transferred into the ground. Blessings and even formal exorcisms by priests were common for those believed to be possessed by demons or afflicted by malevolent curses, demonstrating the deep intertwining of spiritual and physical ailments. These practices were not viewed as illogical. They were desperate attempts to exert some control over the uncontrollable, a testament to the profound hope for relief in a world where so little was scientifically understood about the complexities of the human body and disease. The cycles of life and death, superstitions and rites. The most significant transitions in medieval life: birth, marriage, and death were surrounded by an intricate web of superstitions, rituals, and protective measures designed to ensure good fortune and ward off evil. Birth was a particularly vulnerable time. Expectant mothers and newborns were believed to be susceptible to evil spirits, especially changelings. Charms, blessed amulets, and specific herbs might be placed in the birthing room. The baby's first bath often involved holy water, and certain actions, like cutting a baby's nails too soon, were believed to bring ill fortune. The naming ceremony was also crucial, often linked to saints for protection. Marriage rites were laden with beliefs to ensure fertility and a prosperous union. It was considered good luck for the bride to wear something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. Throwing rice or grain after the ceremony was a fertility charm. Avoiding certain days for marriage or ensuring the first person met after leaving the church was a good omen were also common. Death was perhaps the most heavily ritualized. The dead were seen as powerful, capable of influencing the living. Superstitions revolved around ensuring the soul has peaceful passage and preventing the dead from returning as restless ghosts. Windows might be opened to allow the soul to depart. Mirrors might be covered to prevent the soul from being trapped. Specific burial practices were followed, and prayers for the dead were offered not just for salvation, but also to ensure they rested peacefully and did not haunt the living. The fear of the unquiet dead led to various folk remedies to lay a ghost. Festivals and seasonal rites. The living calendar many. Medieval superstitions and folklore were deeply interwoven with the annual calendar. manifesting in vibrant festivals and seasonal rites that blended ancient pagan traditions with Christian celebrations. May Day, marking the arrival of summer, was a time for fertility rites. People danced around maypoles, lit bonfires, and gathered flowers, believing these actions ensured the fertility of crops and livestock for the coming year. Superstitions about dew collected on May morning, having magical properties for beauty or healing, were widespread. Midsummer's Eve was another powerful night, when the veil between worlds was thought to be thinnest. It was a time for divination, especially by young women hoping to discover their future husbands. Bonfires were lit to ward off evil and purify the air, and specific herbs gathered on this night were believed to have extraordinary protective powers. Halloween, though its modern form is different, had deep roots in medieval beliefs about the boundary between the living and the dead. It was a night when spirits were believed to roam freely. Lanterns were used to ward off evil spirits, and offerings of food were left out for wandering souls. This night was also a prime time for fortune-telling and protective rituals. These festivals were not just holidays. They were living expressions of a worldview that saw the natural cycles as inherently magical and infused with spiritual significance, demanding specific actions and rituals to maintain cosmic balance and ensure communal well-being. The Church's complex stance, absorption and condemnation. The official stance of the medieval Church on these pervasive folk beliefs was, understandably, complex and often contradictory. On one hand, the Church vehemently condemned outright paganism, any form of magic it deemed heretical, and particularly practices linked to devil worship or direct communion with demonic forces. It consistently tried to suppress ancient practices it viewed as rivals to Christian doctrine, issuing edicts and preaching sermons against superstition and idolatry. Yet, on the other hand, the Church proved remarkably adept at absorbing and reinterpreting existing local beliefs into its own expanding Christian framework. This process, known as syncretism, allowed for a gradual Christianization of many older beliefs. For instance, ancient pagan wells, once sites of animistic worship, were often rededicated as holy wells associated with specific Christian saints, their healing properties attributed to the saint's intercession. Pagan seasonal festivals were often rededicated as Christian feast days, with the outward forms of celebration remaining, but their meaning subtly shifted to Christian narratives. The deep-seated belief in the miraculous protective power of holy relics resonated profoundly with existing folk magical traditions of charms and amulets. This created a rich, often contradictory, tapestry of official faith and popular superstition, where a villager might pray to a saint for a good harvest in the church, and then immediately afterward perform a folk charm over their fields, seeing no conflict between the two practices. The Church, in many ways, became a container for these beliefs, seeking to channel them towards a Christian understanding, even if it couldn't fully eradicate their older, more earthy roots. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps you can hear the faint whisper of an ancient charm against the wind, the distant howl of a wolf believed to be an omen, or the quiet, hopeful prayer offered over a horseshoe nailed to a farmhouse door. Imagine a world where the veil between the seen and the unseen was incredibly thin, where magic and mundane were intertwined, and where every moment was filled with hidden meaning, potential danger, and the enduring human need to understand and influence the profound mysteries of life, death, and the vast, living world around them. The medieval mind was a landscape of rich belief, where superstition was not a quaint folly, but a vital, practical, and deeply felt aspect of daily survival. Good night.